The smell of lemon polish and old money always clung to my father's study, a room I usually avoided. But that afternoon, he'd summoned me. "Andrea, sit down," he said, not looking up from a ledger. My name is Andrea, and for the first 20 years of my life, I was the Hamilton family's afterthought. I perched on the edge of the stiff leather chair, my heart thumping a hopeful rhythm. I'd just turned 20, my acceptance letter to the best art institute in the state clutched in my portfolio upstairs. This had to be it. The conversation about my college fund, the one my grandmother had painstakingly set up for me. "As you know," Alejandro began, finally closing the ledger with a decisive thud, "your brother Knox is on the cusp of something truly significant." I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. Knox was always on the cusp of something. Usually it was the cusp of asking for more money. "His new venture," Alejandro continued, his voice swelling with a pride he never used for me, "is going to be big, revolutionary even, but these things require capital, serious capital." "Okay," I said slowly, not liking where this was going. "And?" He steepled his fingers, his gaze finally meeting mine, cold and direct. "And so, I've made an executive decision. Your college fund has been reinvested into Knox's business." The air left my lungs. "What? You can't." "That was for my education, for the Art Institute." My voice was a shaky whisper. "Art Institute?" He scoffed, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Andrea, be realistic. That's a hobby, a little pastime. Knox is building an empire. This is an investment in the family's future, your future too, indirectly." "My future was that fund," I managed, tears stinging my eyes. "Grandma wanted me to—" "Your grandmother was a sentimental woman," he cut me off. "I am a practical man. Knox needs this. He's the heir, Andrea. He will carry on the Hamilton name in a way your sculptures never will." Each word was a hammer blow. I looked towards the door, half expecting my mother Gwendolen to rush in, to defend me, to say something. The door remained closed. She'd known. Of course, she'd known. She'd probably helped him justify it. "It's for the best, dear," I could almost hear her saying. "Think of the family's image when Knox is a success." "But it's my money," I pleaded, a desperate childish sound. "It was money set aside, and I, as your father, have redirected it to where it will do the most good," he stated, his tone final. "Knox is brilliant. This time he's really on to something." Brilliant Knox, who'd flunked out of 2 universities and whose last brilliant venture, luxury pet clothing, had ended with him owing thousands to a bewildered fabric supplier. My hands clenched in my lap. The injustice of it burned, hot and fierce. All my life I'd been the quiet one, the good girl, sketching and sculpting in my corner, never asking for much. Knox was the charming screw-up, always forgiven, always bailed out, always adored. "Your art is a waste of time, Andrea," Alejandro said, as if delivering a final verdict. "A nice little hobby for a young lady, but not a career, not something to build a life on. Now Knox, he's a businessman." I stood up, my legs trembling. The tears were threatening to spill, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "I see," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though it felt like it was coming from someone else. "Thank you for clarifying." He waved a dismissive hand. "You'll understand one day, when you're enjoying the fruits of Knox's success." I walked out of the study, past the closed living room door, where I could hear the faint murmur of Gwendolen on the phone, probably already spinning the narrative for one of her society friends. I went up to my room, the rejection letter from my own life burning a hole in my pocket. Devastation was a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. They'd taken my dream, my one chance, and handed it to him on a silver platter, the perpetually failing golden child. For hours I just sat there, the silence of my room amplifying the hollowness inside me. My carefully constructed portfolio, filled with images of my sculptures, my soul poured into clay and bronze, felt like a mockery. Then the wave receded, leaving behind something hard and sharp. Fury. A cold, quiet fury that settled deep in my bones. They thought they could just erase me, dismiss my passion as worthless. They thought I'd just roll over and accept my fate as the family's forgotten daughter. My gaze fell on a dusty box in the corner, filled with old art school pamphlets and brochures I'd collected since I was a teenager. I pulled it out, my fingers numbly sifting through them. Most were for local colleges, summer programs, things that now felt a million miles away. And then I saw it, a thin, unassuming leaflet tucked between a glossy university prospectus and a community art class schedule. The Phoenix Art Grant. International, prestigious, obscure enough that my father would never have heard of it. The tagline read, "For artists forging new paths from the ashes of convention." A tiny, almost imperceptible spark ignited in the wreckage of my heart. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the embossed logo. "They think they've broken me," I whispered to the empty room, the first stirrings of a plan taking root. "They have no idea what I'm capable of." The next few months were a blur of lukewarm coffee and the smell of disinfectant. I scrubbed floors at a 24-hour diner from midnight till 6, then caught a bus to a dry cleaner's, where I tagged clothes and steamed wrinkles out of other people's lives until 2. The pay was abysmal, but every dollar was a victory, hoarded away for clay, armature wire, and the occasional cheap chisel. My studio was the damp, windowless corner of our basement next to the wheezing old furnace. I'd cleared out forgotten Christmas decorations and Knox's broken hockey equipment. The single bare bulb hanging overhead cast long dancing shadows as I worked, often until my eyes burned and my back screamed in protest. My hands, raw from cleaning chemicals and rough clay, were perpetually sore. "What is that dreadful thumping?" Gwendolyn would call down the stairs sometimes, her voice tight with irritation. "Andrea, are you making another one of your things? It's nearly 11 o'clock. "Just finishing up, Mom," I'd call back, my voice carefully neutral, before turning back to the stubborn curve of a torso I was wrestling into existence. My things were my lifeline. Knox, meanwhile, was living large. He'd leased a flashy new sports car, cherry red naturally, and was always out at expensive restaurants. Networking, he called it. He'd waltz into the kitchen while I was trying to wolf down a piece of toast before my next shift, smelling of cologne and self-importance. "Morning, sis," he'd say, ruffling my already messy hair. "Still playing in the dirt? You know, Dad's right. You should get a real job. Maybe I can find you something in my new office once things take off. Receptionist, maybe." He'd grin, pleased with his own magnanimity. "Thanks, Knox, I'm good," I'd reply, biting back the retort that his new office was currently just a fancy website and a leased co-working space paid for with my stolen future. My parents, oblivious or perhaps willfully blind, beamed at his pronouncements. "He has such a good heart, that boy," Alejandro would say, watching Knox roar off in his new car. "Always thinking of others." The Phoenix Art Grant application was a mountain. It demanded a portfolio of at least 20 distinct pieces, detailed artist statements, letters of recommendation I had no idea how to get, and a 5,000-word essay on the imperative of creation in a disenfranchised world. I photographed my sculptures in the dim basement light, using bedsheets as backdrops, trying to capture their essence despite the grim surroundings. I wrote and rewrote the essay, pouring onto the page all the frustration, the quiet rage, the desperate hope that had become my constant companions. One evening, I overheard my parents in the living room. Their voices were hushed, but the basement door was ajar. "She's just drifting, Alejandro," Gwendolyn said, her voice laced with a familiar sigh of disappointment. "All those odd jobs, and for what?" To buy more mud. It's embarrassing. People are starting to ask what Andrea is doing with her life. I've told her, Alejandro replied, his voice gruff. She needs to find a sensible job, something with benefits. With Knox's ventures taking a little longer to mature than anticipated, we could use another steady income in this house. She needs to contribute properly. Contribute, as if my 16-hour workdays weren't contributing. As if the money I was meticulously saving, coin by painful coin, wasn't for something far more significant than they could ever imagine. I closed my eyes, the clay cool beneath my fingers. Their words were just more fuel. I found Dr. Murray, my old high school art teacher, listed as a guest lecturer at a community college. I tracked her down, my portfolio clutched in a worn satchel. She remembered me, her eyes lighting up when she saw my new work. Andrea, she'd said, after carefully examining my photographs, this is extraordinary. The pain, the strength, it's all there. She agreed to write a recommendation, her belief in me a fragile, precious thing I guarded fiercely. Another came from the owner of a small local gallery where I'd once, years ago, managed to get a single piece displayed in a group show. It wasn't much, but it was something. The deadline for the grant loomed. The last week was a frenzy of scanning, uploading and triple-checking every single document. Knox breezed in one afternoon, finding me hunched over my ancient laptop at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. "Still at it, huh?" he said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "What is all this anyway? Applying for a job at the craft store?" He chuckled. "Something like that," I muttered, not looking up. "Well, hurry up, I need the table. Got some important investors coming over later. Big stuff, you wouldn't understand." He swaggered out, already on his phone, barking orders about canapes. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the silent kitchen, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my tired face. The application portal was open, the submit button pulsing softly. This was it. Years of secret work, of whispered dreams and defiant hopes, all distilled into this one digital package. The odds were astronomical. Thousands of applicants from all over the world, all vying for a handful of grants. My finger hovered over the mouse. A single tear, hot and defiant, escaped and rolled down my cheek, splashing onto the trackpad. I took a deep breath and clicked. The screen refreshed. Applications submitted successfully. I closed the laptop, the silence of the house pressing in. "Now," I whispered to the darkness, "we wait." The waiting was a special kind of torture. Every creak of the floorboards, every ring of the phone, sent a jolt of anxious anticipation through me. I continued my grueling routine, diner, dry cleaner, basement studio, existing in a fog of exhaustion and suppressed hope. My family barely registered my presence, consumed as they were by Knox's latest pronouncements of imminent success. "Just a few more weeks, and the first big deal will close," Knox would announce at dinner, beaming at Alejandro and Gwendolyn. "Then we'll all be sipping champagne on a yacht." "That's wonderful, dear," Gwendolyn would say, her eyes shining. Alejandro would clap him on the back, a rare smile gracing his lips. They never asked for details. Knox's confidence was enough for them. Meanwhile, I noticed subtle shifts. Knox started taking more calls in hushed tones, stepping out onto the porch. Once, I saw him frantically searching for a misplaced invoice, his usual swagger replaced by a flicker of panic. Small things, but they pricked at my awareness. The pressure from my parents to contribute intensified. "Andrea, Mrs. Henderson down the street needs someone to walk her poodles," Gwendolyn said one evening, her voice saccharine. "It's not much, but it's respectable, and you'd be out in the fresh air." "I'm working, Mum," I said, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. "Those little jobs," Alejandro interjected, looking up from his newspaper. "They're hardly a career path. It's time you thought seriously about your future, young lady. We can't support your—" Hobbies? Indefinitely. My hobbies? The words still stung. If only they knew. 3 months after I'd hit submit, it arrived. A thick cream-coloured envelope with an international postmark and an unfamiliar, elegant crest. My heart leapt into my throat. It was addressed to Ms. Andrea H. My hands trembled so violently I could barely slit it open with a kitchen knife. I locked myself in the bathroom, the only place I could guarantee a few moments of privacy. The letterhead was crisp, official. The words swam before my eyes. Pleased to inform you. Exceptional talent. Rigorous selection process. Phoenix Art Grant. Fully funded. Studio placement. Florence, Italy. I sank onto the edge of the bathtub, the letter clutched to my chest. Florence, Italy. Not just money for supplies, but a place to live, a dedicated studio, mentorship. It was more than I had dared to dream. A wave of dizziness washed over me, followed by an almost hysterical urge to laugh. I had done it. Against all odds, against all their expectations, I had done it. The grant came with a substantial stipend, enough to live comfortably and focus solely on my art for 3 years. And the studio placement in Florence was non-negotiable, a core part of the program. It meant leaving. It meant disappearing from their suffocating orbit, from their constant judgment and dismissal. I didn't say a word to anyone. The knowledge was a secret, precious ember I nurtured in silence. I gave my notice at the diner and the dry cleaners, offering vague excuses about pursuing other opportunities. They barely noticed. Knox's big deal seemed to be perpetually on the verge of closing, yet never quite did. The hushed phone calls became more frequent, his temper shorter. I overheard snippets, cash flow issues, unforeseen delays, market volatility. He started asking Alejandro for small bridging loans, which my father, ever the believer, readily provided, though I saw the lines of worry deepening around his eyes. Just a temporary hiccup, Knox would assure them, his voice a little too loud, a little too forced. These things happen in high-stakes business. Gwendolen started making comments about my lack of ambition. You know, Andrea, your cousin Emily just got a promotion at the bank. She's doing so well. It's important to have a proper career. I'm working on it, I'd reply, the secret joy of my impending departure making it easier to bear her passive-aggressive remarks. 2 weeks later, with my flight booked and a single suitcase packed with clothes and my most essential sculpting tools, I stood in the doorway of my basement studio. The clay dust still hung in the air, the ghosts of my creations lingering in the dim light. I touched the rough surface of my workbench, a silent goodbye. Upstairs, Alejandro was on the phone, his voice tight with frustration, arguing with someone about an overdue payment, presumably one of Knox's. Gwendolen was in the living room, flipping through a glossy magazine, a frown etched on her face. Knox was nowhere to be seen, probably out trying to salvage his latest disaster. I slipped out the back door, my small suitcase bumping against my leg. I didn't look back at the house, the place that had been both my prison and my crucible. The air outside felt different, charged with possibility. A taxi I'd pre-booked was waiting at the corner. As I settled into the back seat, the city lights blurring past, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. Goodbye, I whispered to the life I was leaving behind. Or perhaps, au revoir. The ember of my secret was about to become a flame. Florence was a revelation. The light, the history, the sheer unapologetic celebration of art everywhere. It was like stepping into a dream. My studio, arranged through the Phoenix Art Grant, was a sun-drenched space overlooking a bustling piazza, a world away from my dingy basement. Dr. Evangeline Murray, who, it turned out, was a senior fellow on the grant committee, had connections. She introduced me to established sculptors, foundry owners, and gallery curators who saw potential in my raw, emotional style. "Your work has a fire in it, Andrea," Signor Rossi, a grizzled master craftsman who taught me ancient bronze casting techniques, told me one afternoon, his hands covered in plaster, "Don't ever let anyone extinguish it." I poured everything into my sculptures, the years of silent rage, the sting of betrayal, the fierce joy of my newfound freedom. My pieces became larger, more ambitious. I experimented with new materials, pushing the boundaries of what I thought possible. For the first time, I wasn't just Andrea, the overlooked daughter. I was Andrea, the artist. Communication with my family was sparse. Gwendolyn sent occasional emails, her tone a carefully constructed blend of maternal concern and subtle guilt-tripping. "Dearest Andrea," one began, "we do hope you are well. Things here are a bit challenging. Knox has had some unfortunate setbacks with his latest venture. Your father is under a great deal of stress. It would mean so much if you could just call sometime. We worry about you, all alone out there, all alone." I was surrounded by a vibrant community of artists, by mentors who believed in me, by the breathtaking beauty of a city that lived and breathed creativity. I was less alone than I had ever been in their suffocating house. I'd reply with brief, polite updates about my studies, never mentioning the grant, the studio, or the small but growing recognition I was starting to receive in European art circles. Let them think I was still drifting. News of Knox's failures trickled through Gwendolyn's carefully worded emails and the occasional awkward phone call I felt obliged to make on holidays. His revolutionary tech startup had imploded after 6 months. A subsequent foray into artisanal coffee roasting ended when he, apparently, forgot to secure the actual coffee beans. Each failure was more spectacular, more costly than the last. "It's just bad luck, poor boy," Gwendolyn would sigh over the crackling line. "The market is so volatile, and some of his partners, well, they weren't entirely trustworthy." I'd murmur noncommittal sympathies, picturing Alejandro's face, the pride slowly draining away, replaced by a weary anxiety. I learned they'd had to sell Gwendolyn's second car. Then there was talk of downsizing from the large family home in the prestigious neighbourhood. The shame in Gwendolyn's voice when she mentioned this was palpable, even across an ocean. "We're considering a smaller place," she'd said, trying to sound casual. "Less upkeep, you know, more practical for this stage of our lives." Practical. The word Alejandro had used to justify destroying my dreams. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years passed, 3 became 5, then 7. The grant period ended, but I'd secured gallery representation and started receiving commissions. I moved from Florence to Berlin, then to a small but influential arts hub in Amsterdam, always learning, always creating. My style evolved, becoming bolder, more defined. The pain was still there, a deep wellspring I drew from, but now it was tempered with a hard-won strength. One afternoon, an email landed in my inbox with a subject line that made my breath catch: "Commission proposal, City Contemporary Art Museum." My hometown, the city I had fled. Jesse Santiago, the museum's director, had seen my work at a gallery show in Brussels. They were opening a new wing, and he was looking for a centerpiece sculpture for the main atrium. A major commission, a public piece. Back home, I read the proposal, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. Vindication, a touch of apprehension, and a cold, clear sense of purpose. This was it, the culmination of everything I had worked for, of every sacrifice, every lonely night spent wrestling with clay and metal. I looked at the digital mock-ups of the museum atrium, the vast empty space waiting to be filled. My mind was already racing, ideas taking shape, forms emerging from the shadows. It's time," I murmured to my empty studio, the city sounds of Amsterdam a distant hum. "It's time to come home." Not as the forgotten daughter, but as the artist they had dismissed. The irony was so thick I could almost sculpt it. The buzz about the New City Contemporary Art Museum and its grand opening gala was impossible to ignore, even from across the Atlantic. My old friend Simone, a graphic designer who'd stayed in our hometown, kept me updated. "Everyone who's anyone is desperate for a ticket, Andy," she'd said during one of our video calls. "It's the social event of the year." I'd accepted the commission, of course. Jessie Santiago, the museum director, was a dream to work with. Professional, insightful, and genuinely passionate about art. We communicated via video calls and emails, finalising designs, discussing materials, and coordinating the complex logistics of transporting and installing a sculpture that was, by now, monumental. I worked under my full name, Andrea Hamilton, but in the international art world, it was just a name. No one connected me to that St. Hamilton family, the one whose fortunes, according to Simone, were now decidedly on the wane. "You won't believe who's been practically begging for gala tickets," Simone said one evening, her voice laced with amusement. "Your mother?" I raised an eyebrow. "Gwendolen? Really?" "Oh yes, she's been calling everyone she knows, trying to pull strings. Apparently it's crucial for them to be seen there. You know, to show everyone they're still relevant." Simone snorted. After Knox's latest spectacular flameout, they need all the image rehab they can get. Knox. His name was now synonymous with failed ventures and whispers of unpaid debts. Simone had filled me in on the latest disaster, a luxury sustainable resort project that had collapsed before the first ethically questionable bamboo hut was even erected, leaving a trail of angry investors. "So, are they going?" I asked, a strange calmness settling over me. "Managed to snag 3 tickets through some distant cousin on the museum board," Simone confirmed. "Alejandro, Gwendolen, and the golden boy himself. They have no idea you're the artist, do they?" "None whatsoever," I said. Jessie and I had agreed to keep my identity as the creator of the Centerpiece a closely guarded secret until the unveiling. The element of surprise was appealing. A few weeks before the gala, as I was overseeing the final crating of the sculpture sections in my Amsterdam studio, Simone called again, her voice unusually serious. "Andy, there's something else. Something ugly." "What is it?" "It's about Knox's resort scheme. It wasn't just bad business. He basically conned people, took their investment money, and there's nothing to show for it. One of the guys he scammed is Trevor Gill. Remember him? Owned that nice little bakery downtown. Put his life savings into Knox's project." Trevor Gill? I vaguely remembered him, a kind, hard-working man. My stomach churned. "He defrauded him?" "Looks like it," Simone said grimly. "Trevor's been trying to get his money back, but Knox is dodging him. There are rumours he might go to the police, or even the papers. Your parents are apparently terrified of a public scandal. Their attendance at the gala? It's not just about being seen, Andy. It's about damage control, trying to project an image of stability and success while their world is crumbling." The news hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just incompetence anymore. It was outright theft. My father's words echoed in my mind. "Knox is brilliant. An investment in the family's future." What a bitter harvest that investment had yielded. The sculpture arrived in my hometown under a shroud of secrecy, transported in unmarked crates directly to the museum. I flew in a few days later, checking into a discreet hotel under a different name. Jessie met me at the museum after hours. The atrium was vast, echoing, and filled with an expectant hush. My sculpture, still veiled in heavy velvet cloth, dominated the centre of the space. It was taller than I remembered, its presence immense even hidden from view. "It's magnificent, Andrea," Jessie said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Even under wraps, The city is going to be astounded. I walked around it slowly, my hand brushing against the velvet. 7 years of my life poured into metal and stone, 7 years of proving them wrong. This was more than just a sculpture. It was a testament, a reckoning. "They'll be here," I said, more to myself than to Jessie. "My family." He nodded, his expression carefully neutral. He knew the basics of my story, the art is a waste of time dismissal. He'd been discreetly supportive. The day before the gala, I stood alone in the silent atrium, the only light coming from the emergency exits and the faint glow of the city outside. The air was cool, still. I looked up at the towering veiled form, all the pain, the struggle, the quiet fury, the eventual triumph. It was all in there, waiting to be revealed. "Tomorrow," I murmured, my voice barely a whisper in the vast space, "we show them what a waste of time looks like." A small, cold smile touched my lips. The stage was set. The night of the gala arrived, cloaked in a nervous energy that shimmered through the city. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos I knew would fill the museum. Jessie had arranged for me to slip in through a side entrance, avoiding the red carpet scrub. For now, I was just another face in the crowd, an anonymous observer. The museum atrium was already thronged with people when I found a quiet spot near a pillar, a glass of champagne untouched in my hand. The air buzzed with excited chatter, the clinking of glasses and the strains of a string quartet. It was a sea of familiar faces, the city's elite, the movers and shakers, the people whose approval Gwendolen had always craved. And then I saw them, Alejandro, Gwendolen, and Knox. They were standing near the grand staircase, a little too close together, a little too stiff. Alejandro's suit, though expensive, looked a size too big, as if he'd lost weight. He was attempting to engage a portly man I recognised as a city council member, his smile forced, his eyes darting around nervously. Gwendolen was a caricature of her former self. Her dress was overly ornate, her jewellery a touch too flashy, as if trying to compensate for something missing. She scanned the room, her gaze lingering on other women's outfits, a tight, critical line around her mouth. Knox was the most changed. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a shifty, hunted look. He kept glancing towards the entrance, his collar seeming to choke him. He fiddled with his bow tie, his face pale under the bright lights. They looked diminished, smaller. The weight of their secrets and failures clung to them like a shroud. I watched them for a long moment, a strange detachment settling over me. There was no pity, no lingering affection, just a cold, clear observation of cause and effect. This was the reality of their choices, the slow erosion of their carefully constructed facade. Simone found me slipping an arm through mine. "See them?" she whispered, nodding discreetly towards my family. "They look like they're expecting the guillotine, not a champagne refill." "They're putting on a brave face," I murmured. "Brave or terrified," Simone countered. "Trevor Gill is here, by the way. Saw him near the canapé table, looking like he's spoiling for a fight." My gaze sharpened. Trevor. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The lights dimmed slightly and a hush fell over the crowd. The mayor walked onto a small elevated stage near the veiled centerpiece, beaming. He launched into a florid speech about the city's cultural renaissance, the importance of art, the generosity of donors. My family stood a little straighter, Alejandro nodding along as if he were personally responsible for the museum's existence. Finally, the mayor gestured towards a distinguished man standing beside him. "And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the director of our magnificent new City Contemporary Art Museum, Mr. Jesse Santiago." Applause rippled through the atrium. Jesse stepped forward, calm and composed. He thanked the mayor, the board, the staff. My heart began to pound, a slow, steady drum against my ribs. This was it. "Tonight," Jesse began, his voice resonating through the space, "we celebrate not just a new museum, but the arrival of a phenomenal artistic voice. The artist behind our centerpiece sculpture is a testament to dedication, singular vision, and the transformative power of art." I saw Alejandro crane his neck, trying to get a better look at the veiled behemoth. Gwendolyn dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, already overcome by the perceived glamour of it all. Knox just looked increasingly green. "This artist," Jesse continued, his gaze sweeping the room before briefly, almost imperceptibly, flicking towards me, "has poured heart and soul into creating a work that will inspire and challenge us for generations to come." He paused, letting the anticipation build, then gestured dramatically towards the veiled sculpture. "And her name is—" The air crackled. The silence was absolute. My breath caught in my throat. This was more than an unveiling. This was an unmasking. Jesse's voice, amplified by the microphone, seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. Then with a flourish, 2 attendants pulled the cords, and the heavy velvet cloth whispered to the marble floor. A collective gasp swept through the atrium, sharp and sudden, like a shared intake of breath. Then silence. A stunned, awestruck silence. My sculpture stood revealed, soaring towards the high ceiling, a dynamic swirl of bronze and weathered steel, catching the specially designed spotlights. It was a piece born of fire and resilience, of brokenness and strength. It depicted a figure, not quite human, not quite mythical, emerging from a chaotic tangle of what looked like shattered foundations, reaching, striving, its surface a tapestry of textures, some rough and scarred, others polished to a gleaming hope. It was, I knew, the best work I had ever done. The silence stretched, and then it broke. Like a dam bursting, applause thundered through the space, echoing off the high walls, growing louder and more insistent. People were on their feet, their faces turned towards the sculpture, then towards Jesse, then searching the crowd. "Andrea Hamilton!" Jesse's voice finally cut through the ovation, clear and proud. The spotlight, as if by magic, found me. I stood, my heart hammering, but my expression, I hoped, was serene. The applause intensified. Across the room, I saw Alejandro. He'd been squinting at the base of the sculpture, where a small, discreet dedication plaque was set. As the main lights on the piece fully illuminated, his head snapped up. His eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted from the towering sculpture to me, standing in the spotlight, then back to the plaque. I could almost see the name burn itself onto his retinas. Andrea Hamilton. His face went slack, the colour draining from it. He looked as if he'd been physically struck. Gwendolyn's hand flew to her mouth, a strangled gasp escaping. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the sudden ghastly pallor of her skin. She swayed, and Alejandro, despite his own shock, instinctively reached out to steady her. Knox just stared, his jaw hanging open, his eyes vacant with a dawning, horrified comprehension. The arrogant smirk he usually wore was wiped clean, replaced by a look of utter, bewildered defeat. The realization hit them, all 3 of them, in a brutal public wave, in front of the entire city's elite, the people whose opinions they valued above all else. Cameras flashed, capturing their stunned faces for posterity. The applause continued, a wave of validation washing over me. I met Alejandro's gaze across the crowded room. His eyes, moments before filled with a dawning horror, now held a flicker of something else. Confusion, perhaps even a nascent fury. I held his stare, cool and unwavering, letting him see the woman I had become, the artist he had dismissed. After what felt like an age, the applause began to subside. People started moving, pressing forward, a babble of excited voices congratulating Jesse, craning their necks to get closer to the sculpture. And now, trying to get closer to me. And then my family was there. They pushed through the throng, their faces a chaotic mess of emotions. Alejandro, his composure shattered, grabbed my arm. "Andrea, what is the meaning of this? What is going on?" His voice was a harsh whisper, laced with an indignation that was almost comical. Gwendolen, close behind him, was already wringing her hands. "Andrea, the people, everyone is looking. You should have told us. How could you keep something like this a secret?" Her concern, as always, was for appearances, for the optics of the situation. Knox hovered behind them, looking like a trapped animal, his eyes darting around as if seeking an escape route. Before I could utter a single word, a new voice cut through the air, loud and furious. "Hamilton!" Everyone turned. Trevor Gill, his face flushed with anger, was pointing directly at Knox. "You, Knox Hamilton, you thought you could hide at a fancy party after stealing my money, after ruining me." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads swiveled from my family to Trevor, then back again. The atmosphere, moments before celebratory, was now charged with a different kind of electricity. Scandal. I don't know what you're talking about," Knox stammered, shrinking back. "Oh, you know," Trevor advanced, his voice rising. "My life savings, you con man! You and your sham resort!" Museum security guards, alerted by the commotion, began to move purposefully towards the escalating scene. The flashes of cameras intensified, no longer focused on the art, but on the unfolding family drama and the public accusation. My moment of triumph was now inextricably linked with their public disgrace, and somehow it felt perfectly, karmically right. The gala ended not with polite applause, but with the undignified spectacle of Knox being escorted out by museum security, Trevor Gill's furious accusations echoing in the marble atrium. Alejandro and Gwendolen, their faces masks of mortification, trailed in his wake, the whispers and stares of the city's elite following them like a physical blow. My sculpture, Phoenix Rising, stood bathed in light, a silent, powerful witness to their spectacular implosion. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Trevor's public outburst opened the floodgates. Other investors, emboldened, came forward. The newspapers, smelling blood, had a field day. Art Gala unveils more than sculpture. Hamilton heir accused of fraud. Knox's misfortunes were laid bare for all to see, not as bad luck, but as a pattern of deception and gross incompetence. Legal proceedings began almost instantly. A few days later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Andrea, it's your father." Alejandro's voice was hollow, stripped of its usual authority. "Yes?" I kept my tone even. Gwendolen and I, we need to see you. Can we come over? To your hotel?" I agreed, a sense of inevitability settling over me. They arrived looking like ghosts of their former selves. Alejandro's shoulders were slumped, Gwendolen's eyes red-rimmed and swollen. They sat awkwardly on the edge of the hotel room sofa, the silence stretching uncomfortably. "Andrea," Gwendolen began, her voice trembling, "this is a nightmare. The things people are saying. Knox is—" She couldn't finish. "He's facing the consequences of his actions," I said simply. Alejandro cleared his throat. "We were hoping. Perhaps you could talk to some people, explain. You're clearly very successful now, respected. Maybe you could help smooth things over, for the family's sake." There it was. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of their decades of dismissal and betrayal, but a plea for me to use my hard-won success to clean up their mess. "Help," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Let me understand. You want me to help the family that told me my passion was a waste of time? The father who took my college fund, my only chance, and gave it to the son he idolized? The son who has now brought shame and ruin upon you?" Gwendolen flinched. Alejandro looked down at his hands. Do you remember, Father, I continued, my voice gaining strength, what you said to me in your study all those years ago? Your art is a waste of time, Andrea, a nice little hobby. You told me Knox was the future, the one who would carry on the name. I let out a short, mirthless laugh. Well, he's certainly made the name infamous. We didn't understand, Gwendolen whispered, tears welling. We made mistakes. Mistakes? I stood up, pacing the small room. You didn't just make mistakes. You actively chose to dismiss me, to devalue me, to sacrifice my dreams for his. You never once supported my art. You never once believed in me, not until it became convenient, until you saw my name in lights next to a piece you couldn't ignore. We need financial help, Andrea, Alejandro said, his voice barely audible. Everything. It's all gone. The lawyers, Knox's debts. Mink financial help? I stopped in front of him. The money you stole from me for my education would have been a good start, wouldn't it? But that too was poured into Knox's brilliant ventures. I looked from one to the other, their faces etched with desperation and a dawning understanding that there would be no rescue from me. I owe you nothing, I said, the words clear and final. Not my money, not my influence, not my pity. You made your choices. Knox made his. Now you all get to live with them. They left soon after, defeated. There were no more pleas, no more attempts at justification, just the heavy silence of their shattered pride. I didn't engage in public defences of them. I didn't offer financial aid. I continued with my work, the success of the museum piece leading to more commissions, more recognition. News of my family's struggles reached me occasionally. The forced sale of their downsized home, Knox's eventual conviction, their complete social ostracization. They were distant echoes from a past I had not just survived, but transcended. My revenge wasn't loud or fiery. It was the quiet, undeniable fact of my success, built on the very thing they had scorned. Their downfall was simply the inevitable karmic bill coming due. Sometimes I'd look at an old photograph I kept. A much younger me, sketches clutched in my hand, a hopeful, uncertain look in my eyes. The girl in that photo had no idea of the battles ahead, or the strength she would find. Turns out, I'd muse, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips, my time was anything but wasted. My greatest creation wasn't just the sculpture that now graced the museum atrium. It was the life I had forged from their dismissal, the justice that had finally been served.
Another abstract piece? My father's voice dripped with disdain as he surveyed my latest painting. Sophie, when are you going to grow up and do something real with your life? I continued cleaning my brushes, refusing to let him see how much his words stung. The studio I'd built in my small apartment was my sanctuary, even if my parents saw it as just another sign of my failure to meet their expectations. This is real, Dad, I said quietly. My work is selling well. He snorted, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit. Selling? To who? Those coffee shops where you hang your little exhibitions. My name is Sophie Anderson, and at 31, I was both a disappointment to my family of prestigious art dealers and secretly one of the most successful collectors in the modern art world. Not that they knew that last part. The coffee shops pay their bills, I replied, thinking of the multimillion-dollar deals I closed that week under my professional alias, and they support local artists. Local artists, he muttered like it was a curse word. The Anderson Gallery hasn't showcased a local artist in 50 years. We deal in real art, Sophie. Masters. Established names. Not these experiments. I looked at my painting, an intricate exploration of light and shadow that would sell for more than my father's gallery made in a month, once I revealed it under my professional name. But Harrison Anderson would never see past his daughter's hobby to recognize real talent. Was there something specific you needed, Dad? I asked, finally turning to face him. You don't usually visit my neighborhood. He grimaced, looking around my modest apartment like he might catch something. Your mother wanted me to remind you about the gallery's anniversary gala next week. She expects you to attend. And Sophie, his eyes narrowed. Please dress appropriately. No paint-stained jeans or artistic statements. I know how to dress for a gala, I said, suppressing a smile as I thought of the designer gown hanging in my other apartment, the one my parents didn't know existed. Good, and try to be pleasant. We're having some very important collectors attending. The gallery's future could depend on making the right impression. That caught my attention. Harrison Anderson never admitted to needing anything, especially not good impressions. Is everything okay with the gallery? Fine, he said too quickly. Just the usual market fluctuations. Nothing for you to worry about with your alternative career path. After he left, I immediately called Maya, my business partner and the only person who knew both sides of my life. The great Harrison Anderson actually admitted to needing good impressions. Maya let out a low whistle. Things must be worse than we thought. Run the numbers again, I instructed. Everything about the Anderson Gallery, sales, acquisitions, market position. And Maya, be thorough. You got it, boss. Want me to check your parents' personal finances too? I hesitated. Investigating my own family felt wrong, but I'd learned the hard way that sentiment had no place in business. Yes, discreetly. Always am. By the way, that last piece you finished? Matsuda called again. He's offering 7 figures, sight unseen. I glanced at the painting my father had dismissed. Tell him it's not for sale yet. I have a feeling we might need it for something else. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. While my parents thought I was playing artist in my studio, I was actually managing a global art empire. Under the name S.A. Blake, I built one of the most influential collections of modern and contemporary art in the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents worshipped S.A. Blake, had tried repeatedly to court him for their gallery. They never suspected that their disappointment of a daughter was the mysterious collector they so desperately wanted to impress. Maya's report arrived the night before the gala, and it was worse than I'd imagined. They're underwater, she explained during our secure video call. The gallery's been losing money for years. Your father's been covering it with personal funds, but, those are running out too. They've mortgaged everything. The gallery, their house, even their private collection. One more bad quarter and it all collapses. I sat back, letting the information sink in. The Anderson Gallery had been a cornerstone of the art world for 3 generations. My grandfather had built it from nothing. My father had elevated it to international prominence, and now, how did they let it get this bad? Maya's image flickered as she shuffled through documents. Multiple factors. They're still operating like it's 1990, all overhead, no digital presence. They've missed every major trend in contemporary art. But mostly, they're stuck in the past, showcasing the same established names while ignoring emerging talents. Everything I've been trying to tell them for years, I murmured. Exactly. The market's changed, but they haven't. These days, collectors want to discover new artists, not just buy another Picasso. I thought of all the talented artists I'd discovered in those coffee shops my father sneered at. Many of them were now represented by my company, their work selling for small fortunes to collectors who appreciated innovation. What are their options? Without immediate intervention, bankruptcy within 6 months. Best case scenario, they're forced to sell the gallery. Worst case, they lose everything, including their reputation. I stared at my painting, the one Matsuda wanted to buy. Send me everything, financial records, market analysis, potential strategies. And Maya, get the lawyers ready. I think it's time for S.A. Blake to make an appearance. You're going to reveal yourself? No, I smiled. I'm going to save them. They just won't know it's me doing the saving. The morning of the gala, I prepared myself carefully. The dress I'd chosen, a classic Valentino in midnight blue, was elegant enough to meet my mother's standards while still allowing me to blend into the background. I wanted to observe tonight, not draw attention. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Paperwork ready. Sure you want to do this? Yes, I replied. Time to show them what local art can really do. The Anderson Gallery was housed in a magnificent historic building downtown. Its classical architecture a testament to old money and established tastes. As I walked up the marble steps, I remembered all the times I played here as a child, dreaming of having my own work displayed on these hallowed walls. Sophie, my mother's voice cut through my nostalgia. Thank goodness you're early. and you look suitable." Diana Anderson was the epitome of sophisticated grace, her silver hair perfectly styled and her designer dress impeccable. She air-kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. "The caterers are setting up in the East Wing," she said, already dismissing me. "Make sure they don't touch any of the displays." "Actually, Mom, I thought I'd look around first. It's been a while since I've seen the new acquisitions." She waved distractedly, her attention caught by arriving staff. I took advantage of her distraction to slip away, beginning my careful assessment of the gallery. The main hall was exactly as I remembered, grand, imposing, and hopelessly outdated. Masterpieces worth millions hung in predictable arrangements, their impact dulled by familiarity. There was nothing here to excite modern collectors, nothing to suggest the gallery understood contemporary trends. Doing a little reconnaissance, I turned to find Thomas Chen, my father's gallery director, watching me with knowing eyes. Thomas had always been kind to me, even when I was just the owner's rebellious daughter. "Just admiring the classics," I said carefully. He glanced around before lowering his voice. "Your father's worried. Won't admit it, of course, but this gala, it's more than just an anniversary celebration." "Oh?" "Several major collectors are coming tonight. Your father's hoping to secure some significant investments." He paused. "Say Blake was invited." I kept my expression neutral. The mysterious collector, I thought no one knew who they were. "No one does. But your father's convinced Blake will appear tonight. He's desperate to make a deal." I thought of the documents Maya had prepared, the plans I'd spent all week perfecting. "And if Blake doesn't show?" Thomas sighed. "Then I fear the Anderson Gallery's days are numbered." The gala began at 8. The gallery's halls filling with the elite of the art world. I recognized many faces, collectors I'd dealt with, artists I'd discovered, critics who'd unknowingly reviewed my work. All of them here to witness either the salvation or the downfall of one of the industry's most established institutions. My father was in his element, moving from group to group with practiced charm. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting to the entrance. "Anything?" he asked Thomas during a brief lull. "No sign of Blake," Thomas replied. "But the night is young." I checked my phone. Maya had everything in place. The offers, the contracts, the carefully crafted story that would explain S.A. Blake's interest in saving the Anderson Gallery. "Sophie," my mother's sharp voice interrupted my thoughts. "Stop hiding in corners. The Prescotts want to hear about your artistic endeavors." I suppressed a sigh and followed her to where Albert and Margaret Prescott held court. They were old family friends and significant collectors, though they'd never looked at my work. "Still painting, dear?" Margaret asked with carefully crafted concern. "How persistent of you." "Someone has to make the art that fills these walls," I replied mildly. Albert laughed as if I told a particularly naive joke. "Yes, well, some art belongs in galleries and some belongs in other venues. Like the private collections of discerning buyers who recognize talent regardless of name or pedigree." I thought but didn't say. The evening wore on, and I could see my father's composure cracking. Several potential investors had already made their excuses and left. The great S.A. Blake had not appeared. "It's over," I overheard him tell my mother in a quiet corner. "Without Blake's investment. Harrison, surely there are other options. None that won't cost us everything." He looked around the gallery, his life's work, his father's legacy. "Maybe it's time to accept that the world has changed. We just didn't change with it." I slipped away, finding a private spot to make a call. "Ready?" Maya asked. "Send it." Moments later, my father's phone buzzed. I watched as he read the message, his face transforming from despair to disbelief to desperate hope. "Diana," he called. "Blake's representative is coming, tomorrow morning." The gallery erupted in excited whispers. Everyone knew what this could mean. "See," my mother said, patting his arm. "All your worrying for nothing. Say Blake would never let the Anderson Gallery fail." I smiled, thinking of the papers waiting in Maya's office. My parents had no idea how right they were, or why. The next morning, I arrived at the gallery early, wearing my starving artist uniform of paint-stained jeans and an oversized sweater. My father barely noticed me as I slipped in, too busy preparing for his meeting with S.A. Blake's representative. "Sophie, not now," he said distractedly when I tried to speak to him. "Blake's team will be here any minute. We need everything to be perfect." I watched him adjust a painting that was already perfectly straight. Dad, maybe we should talk about. Later, he cut me off. Whatever little project you're working on can wait. This is important. Right on cue, Maya walked through the front doors of the gallery. She looked every inch the high-powered art world attorney in her tailored suit and sleek briefcase. No one would ever connect her to the bohemian art consultant who helped me discover new talents in underground galleries. Mr. Anderson, she extended her hand. I'm Margaret Chin, representing S.A. Blake. My father practically tripped over himself to shake her hand. Yes, yes. We're so honored. Please come this way to my office. I followed them, unnoticed as usual. My mother appeared from somewhere, her perfect mask of composure slightly cracked with anticipation. Sophie, she hissed, don't you have somewhere else to be? Actually, Maya said smoothly, Ms. Anderson should join us. This concerns her too. My parents exchanged confused looks but didn't argue. In their minds, Blake's representative must have her reasons, even if they couldn't understand them. My father's office was a testament to old-world luxury, leather-bound books, antique furniture, and prized artworks covering every wall. Maya took it all in with professional interest, though I knew she was mentally calculating how much it would all bring at auction if necessary. Before we begin, Maya said, setting her briefcase on the desk, I need to clarify something. This meeting isn't just about saving the Anderson Gallery, it's about transforming it. Transforming? My father frowned. I don't understand. Our gallery has a certain reputation. A reputation that's killing it, Maya interrupted gently. Mr. Anderson, your gallery is 3 months away from bankruptcy. Your traditional model isn't working anymore. The color drained from my father's face. How did you? Say Blake has been watching your gallery for some time. Maya continued. We've seen its decline, but we've also seen its potential. With the right changes, the Anderson Gallery could become a bridge between classical and contemporary art. My mother grabbed my father's hand. What kind of changes? Maya opened her briefcase and began laying out documents. First, a complete financial restructuring. Blake will purchase the gallery's debt and invest significant capital for modernization. Purchase our debt. My father's voice was faint. All of it, Maya confirmed. The gallery, the mortgages, everything. In exchange, Blake wants 2 things: 51% ownership and complete creative control over the gallery's new direction. Control? Now my father's voice rose sharply. This gallery has been in my family for generations. We have standards, traditions that are bankrupting you, Maya said firmly. Mr. Anderson, this isn't a hostile takeover. It's a rescue mission. Blake wants to preserve your legacy while bringing the gallery into the modern era. I watched my father struggle with this, his pride warred with his desperation, his fear of change battling his fear of losing everything. What? He swallowed hard. What exactly would these changes entail? Maya pulled out a tablet, bringing up images of modern gallery spaces, a complete renovation of the East Wing to showcase emerging artists. Digital installations, interactive exhibits, a strong online presence, and most importantly, a new curator who understands both classical and contemporary markets. My mother gasped. Replace Thomas? Not replace, I found myself saying. Everyone turned to look at me, as if just remembering I was there. Partner with. Someone who can bridge the gap between old and new. Maya nodded approvingly. Exactly. In fact, Blake has someone specific in mind. She slid another document across the desk. My father picked it up, his eyes widening as he read. This can't be right. These sales figures. They're correct, Maya assured him. Every piece sold, every exhibition curated, every artist discovered, all verified. But this is, he looked up at me, really seeing me for the first time in years. Sophie? I met his gaze steadily. Remember all those coffee shop exhibitions you mocked? They weren't just about selling paintings. They were about finding talent, building relationships, understanding where the market is going, not just where it's been. You, my mother's voice was barely a whisper. You've been selling art? Successfully. Very successfully, Maya confirmed. Your daughter has one of the best eyes in the business for emerging talent. Artists she's discovered are now selling for 6 and 7 figures. My father slumped in his chair. All this time, while we were dismissing your work, I was learning the business. I finished for him. Not your way, but my way, and it works. Maya pulled out more documents. sales records, critical reviews, market analyses, all showing how the artists I championed had skyrocketed in value. Say Blake wants Sophie as the gallery's new co-curator, she explained, working alongside Thomas to blend classical expertise with contemporary vision. Blake knows my work, I asked, playing my part. Blake knows everything about the art world, Maya said with the smallest wink, including who really understands it. My parents were silent for a long time, looking through the documents. I could see them struggling to reconcile their image of their disappointing daughter with these proof of my success. Finally, my father looked up. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened? I asked quietly, or would you have dismissed it as another hobby, another sign that I wasn't living up to the Anderson name? He flinched. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected him gently. You wanted what was best for the gallery, what fit your vision of success. You never asked what I wanted. And now, my mother asked, what do you want now? I looked around the gallery, the place that had shaped my childhood, taught me to love art in all its forms. I want to save this place, but not by living in the past. The art world is changing. We need to change with it. Maya cleared her throat. The contracts are ready if you want to review them. Blake's offer expires at the end of the week. My father picked up his reading glasses, then hesitated. This curator position, you'd accept it. Work with us, not against us. I've never been against you, Dad. I just saw possibilities you couldn't see. He nodded slowly. And Blake? Why remain anonymous? Why not meet with us directly? Maya smiled diplomatically. Say Blake prefers to let the art speak for itself. Success isn't always about being seen. The next few hours were a blur of negotiations and signatures. My parents' lawyers were called, documents were reviewed, and slowly the future of the Anderson Gallery took shape. By evening, it was done. The gallery was saved, though transformed. My parents had surrendered control but secured their legacy, and I had finally found a way to bridge my two worlds. There's one more thing, Maya said as we prepared to leave. She pulled out a single canvas, carefully wrapped. My father unwrapped it slowly, his eyes widening as he revealed my latest painting, the one he'd dismissed in my studio. Blake would like this to be the first piece displayed in the gallery's new contemporary wing, Maya explained, as a symbol of the transition between old and new. This is, my father studied the painting with new eyes. This is extraordinary, Sophie. The complexity, the technique. How did we not see it? Because you weren't looking, I said simply. You saw what you expected to see. My mother touched the canvas gently. Blake wants this piece, but would he rather keep it? Your first major gallery showing? I smiled, thinking of all my work that had already sold for small fortunes under different names. Something tells me there will be more pieces to come. After Maya left, my parents insisted I stay for dinner. We sat in my father's office, surrounded by the art that had shaped our lives, and really talked for the first time in years. We were wrong, my father said finally. About you, about art, about everything. Can you forgive us? There's nothing to forgive, I assured him. We all had to learn to see things differently. Over the next few months, the Anderson Gallery underwent its transformation. The East Wing was renovated into a stunning contemporary space. Digital installations attracted younger collectors. Our online presence grew exponentially. And through it all, my secret remained safe. Say Blake continued to collect and influence from the shadows, while Sophie Anderson emerged as a respected curator with an eye for new talent. 1 year after the gallery's transformation, we hosted a special exhibition. Bridging Worlds showcased classical masterpieces alongside contemporary works, demonstrating how tradition and innovation could coexist beautifully. The centerpiece was my painting, the one that had started it all. Now valued at over $1 million, it drew collectors and critics from around the world. I still can't believe S.A. Blake saw your potential before we did, my father said during the opening, watching as another wealthy collector admired my work. I smiled, thinking of the latest acquisition I'd made under Blake's name. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. Speaking of Blake, my mother joined us, champagne in hand. The mysterious collector has acquired another piece for the gallery. Did you hear? No, I said innocently. Do tell. As she launched into the story, I caught Maya's eye across the room. She raised her glass slightly. a private toast to our shared secret. The truth about S.A. Blake would come out eventually. The art world loved its mysteries, but it loved revelations even more. When that day came, I hoped my parents would understand why I kept my success hidden for so long. But for now, I was content to let them marvel at the transformation of both their gallery and their daughter. They'd learned to see art, and me, with new eyes. That was worth more than any painting in our collection. To new perspectives, I said, raising my glass. To family, my father added. To art, my mother finished. To all of it, I thought. To hidden talents and second chances. To proving that success doesn't always look the way we expect. And most importantly, to finally being seen for who I really was. Not just an artist, not just a curator, but someone who had found her own way to make her mark on the world. Still hiding among your precious books, Julia? Drew's voice cut through the quiet of the library's rare books section. Don't you get tired of wasting your life? I looked up from the leather-bound volume I was examining to find my brother leaning against a shelf, his designer suit a stark contrast to my modest librarian's attire. His smirk was the same one he'd worn since childhood, the expression of someone who believed he'd already won. "Hello, Drew," I said calmly, carefully placing the book back in its protective case. "I didn't expect to see you here. Mom sent me. She wants to make sure you're not going to embarrass us at their anniversary party tonight." He glanced around the library with poorly concealed disdain. "Though I suppose it's too late for that. A librarian in the family, Dad's still trying to explain that one to his golf buddies. My name is Julia Morgan, though my brother prefers the family disappointment. At 34, I was the head librarian at the city's central library, a position that made my old money family cringe. What they didn't know, what I'd carefully hidden for years, was that my life among the books was only half the story. I'll be there," I assured him, standing to my full height. Even in heels, he still towered over me. "And I'll dress appropriately." "See that you do." He straightened his Rolex, a recent purchase he hadn't stopped flaunting. "It's an important night. I'm announcing some big news." "Oh." His grin widened. "Bought my third company this year. Morgan Industries is now officially a conglomerate. Dad's going to be so proud." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. If Drew noticed the slight tightening of my hands, he didn't mention it. "That's wonderful," I said. "Congratulations." "Thanks." He didn't even try to make it sound sincere. "You know, there's still time for you to join the real world. I could use someone to manage our corporate library. At least then you'd be doing something useful with all this knowledge." The way he said knowledge made it sound like a disease. I smiled, thinking of the encrypted laptop in my office safe, of the meetings I'd been taking under a different name. "I'm happy where I am," I told him. He shrugged, already turning away. "Your loss. Remember, 7 o'clock sharp, and Julia?" He paused at the door. "Try not to bring any books this time." After he left, I waited exactly 5 minutes before heading to my office. The space was modest but efficient, with walls of books and a desk that had seen better days. To most, it looked exactly like what they'd expect from a librarian's office. They never noticed the state-of-the-art security system or the fact that my ancient desktop computer was a custom-built machine more powerful than most corporate servers. Locking the door, I opened my laptop and connected to a secure server. 3 windows popped up immediately, video calls waiting from Tokyo, London, and New York. "Good morning, Ms. Morgan." My assistant's voice came through clearly. "The Nakamura deal is ready for final review." "Thank you, Sarah," I said, scanning the documents on my screen. "Has legal finished their assessment?" "Yes, ma'am. The acquisition terms are solid. We can move forward whenever you're ready." I glanced at my watch. 5 hours until my parents' anniversary party. Plenty of time. "Schedule the signing for tomorrow morning," I instructed. "And Sarah, make sure everything's in place for the announcement." "Already done. The press release is ready to go." Though, she hesitated. "Are you sure about the timing?" I thought of Drew's smug face, of years of condescension and dismissal. "Yes, I'm sure. Tomorrow morning will be perfect." After ending the call, I sat back in my chair, looking at the empire I built in secret. Morgan Global Partners, no relation to my brother's Morgan Industries, despite the similar name, was now one of the largest private equity firms in the world. We operated entirely in the shadows, using shell companies and discrete investments to hide our true size. For 7 years, I'd built this company while maintaining my cover as a simple librarian. The job wasn't just a front. I genuinely loved books, loved preserving knowledge and helping people access it. But it also provided the perfect cover for my other life. Who would suspect the quiet librarian of being one of the most powerful people in global finance? My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Don't forget to do something with your hair, dear. The Prescotts will be there tonight." The Prescotts, one of many old money families my parents were always trying to impress. I texted back a simple "ok" and began packing up for the day. I had a hair appointment already scheduled, along with a fitting for the dress I'd bought specifically for tonight. Just because I didn't flaunt my wealth didn't mean I couldn't play the part when needed. The salon was empty when I arrived, perks of owning the building and having a standing private appointment. Maria, my longtime stylist and one of the few people who knew my secret, was waiting. "The usual?" she asked, gesturing to a chair. "Something a bit more formal today," I said. "Family event." She nodded knowingly. "Ah, the famous Morgan anniversary party. Your brother was in earlier, talking about it to anyone who would listen." I'm sure he was. As Maria worked, I checked my emails on a secure phone. The Nakamura acquisition was proceeding smoothly. By this time tomorrow, Morgan Global Partners would own one of the largest tech manufacturers in Asia. The same company my brother had been trying to buy for months. "Your brother mentioned he's buying some big company," Maria said, as if reading my thoughts. Couldn't stop bragging about it. I smiled. "He's trying to buy it. There's a difference." She caught my eye in the mirror. "You didn't? Let's just say tomorrow's papers will be interesting." 3 hours later, I stood in front of my mirror at home, examining my transformation. The simple librarian was gone, replaced by someone who could hold her own at any society event. The dress, a deep blue Valentino I'd had altered to perfection, was elegant without being flashy. My jewelry was minimal but expensive, the kind of pieces old money favored. Most importantly, I looked exactly like what my family expected, their bookish daughter making an effort to fit in. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Sarah. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Are you sure you don't want to tell them tonight?" "No," I replied. "Let them have their party. Tomorrow will be soon enough." The Morgan family estate was lit up like a Christmas tree when I arrived. Cars lined up along the circular driveway. I recognized most of them, Bentleys and Rolls-Royces belonging to the same families that had been part of our social circle for generations. A valet appeared as I pulled up in my modest Audi, another carefully chosen prop. The car was nice enough to avoid embarrassing my parents, but not so nice as to raise questions about a librarian's salary. Miss Morgan, Jenkins, our family's longtime butler, greeted me at the door. "Your parents are in the main hall." I could hear the party before I saw it, the murmur of sophisticated conversation, the clink of expensive crystal, the subtle notes of a string quartet. This was my parents' world, the one I'd chosen to step away from, at least publicly. "Julia," my mother's voice carried across the hall. "Darling, you look presentable." Coming from her, it was high praise. Elizabeth Morgan had never quite forgiven me for choosing books over business, but at least I'd made an effort with my appearance tonight. "Happy anniversary, Mom," I said, kissing her cheek. "You look beautiful." She did. At 60, she was still the epitome of grace and style. Her friends often joked that she'd made a deal with the devil to maintain her youthful appearance. "Your father's by the fireplace," she said, already scanning the room for more important guests. "Do say hello before you hide in the library." I made my way through the crowd, accepting air kisses and polite inquiries about my little job at the library. Most of these people had known me since childhood, had watched me grow up alongside their own children. None of them understood my choices. "There's my girl," Dad's voice boomed as I approached. He was holding court with his usual crowd, golf buddies and business associates who'd been part of his life for decades. "Come here, let them see you." I submitted to his enthusiastic hug, noting the slight slur in his words. He'd started the celebrations early, as usual. "Still working with those books?" Harold Prescott asked, his tone making it clear what he thought of such an occupation. "Still working with those books," I confirmed. "Someone has to preserve knowledge for the next generation." They laughed, the indulgent chuckle of people humoring what they saw as a harmless eccentricity. "Speaking of the next generation," Dad said proudly, "where's your brother? He's got some big news to share." As if on cue, Drew appeared, champagne in hand. He changed into an even more expensive suit, his Rolex catching the light as he gestured. "Everyone," he called out, his voice carrying across the hall. "I'd like to make an announcement." The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. Drew lived for moments like this, had always thrived on being the center of attention. "As some of you know, Morgan Industries has been growing rapidly this year," he began, playing to his audience. "Today, I'm proud to announce that we're on the verge of our biggest acquisition yet. By this time next week, we'll own Nakamura Tech." The room erupted in applause. Dad beamed with pride, Mom dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. I sipped my champagne and waited. "Of course," Drew continued, "the deal isn't quite final yet, but my sources tell me it's just a matter of time. The papers are ready to sign." "That's wonderful, son," Dad exclaimed. "Always knew you had it in you, a real businessman, just like your old man." Drew basked in the praise, accepting congratulations from all sides. Finally, his gaze fell on me. "What do you think, little sister?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Ready to admit you backed the wrong horse." I met his eyes calmly. "I think," I said carefully, "that you shouldn't count your chickens before they're hatched." He laughed and others joined in. "Always so cautious, Jules. That's why you'll never be more than what you are, hiding in your library while the rest of us build empires." Perhaps, I agreed mildly, but at least I understand the value of due diligence. His eyes narrowed slightly. Drew had never liked it when I used big words, seeing it as a challenge to his intelligence. "Due diligence?" he scoffed. "I've got the best lawyers in the business. Everything's taken care of." I just smiled and raised my glass. "Then I guess we'll all see tomorrow, won't we?" He frowned, catching something in my tone, but before he could press further, Mom was calling everyone to dinner. The dining room was a masterpiece of old-world elegance, gleaming mahogany, priceless china, crystal that had been in the family for generations. I took my assigned seat, noting with amusement that I'd been placed at the far end of the table, well away from any important guests. As the first course was served, Drew held court from his position near Dad, regaling everyone with tales of his business prowess. I kept quiet, responding politely when addressed but otherwise focusing on my food. "I just don't understand," Mrs. Prescott said from beside me, her voice low. "You were always so bright in school. You could have done anything. Why waste your life with books?" I considered how to answer. In 12 hours, everything would change. But for now, I had a role to play. "Books are never a waste," I said simply. "They teach us that things aren't always what they seem." She shook her head, clearly disappointed by my response. "Well, at least your brother is upholding the family name. Though it must be hard, watching him succeed while well, it's not as hard as you might think." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of subtle insults and backhanded compliments. I'd grown used to it over the years, had learned to let it roll off me like water. As dessert was being served, Drew stood again, calling for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, raising his glass. "To Mom and Dad, who taught me everything I know about business, who showed me what real success looks like." He paused, his eyes finding me. "And to my sister, who proves that not everyone is cut out for the family business." The room chuckled politely. I raised my glass with the others, thinking of the documents waiting to be signed, of the press release scheduled for morning. "Enjoying the party?" Drew asked later, cornering me by the dessert table. "It's lovely," I replied. "Mom and Dad must be so proud." "They are." He straightened his tie smugly. "Though it would have been nice if both their children had amounted to something." I selected a chocolate truffle, examining it carefully. "You know, Drew, success isn't always about making the most noise." He snorted. "No? Tell that to my bank account. How much does a librarian make these days anyway? Enough to buy those shoes." I glanced down at my Louboutins, another carefully chosen piece of my costume. "I'm good with money." "Right." He finished his champagne in one gulp. "Well, this has been fun, but I should mingle. Big day tomorrow after all. That Nakamura deal isn't going to close itself." As he walked away, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Sarah. "Everything ready for morning." Her response was immediate. "All set. Press release goes out at 9 a.m. sharp. Want me to send you the final numbers?" "No need," I replied. "I'll see them in the papers with everyone else." The party began winding down around midnight. I said my goodbyes, accepting one last round of condescending comments about my career choices. You really should consider Drew's offer, Mom said as I kissed her cheek. A corporate library would be so much more appropriate. I'll think about it, I promised, knowing I would do no such thing. As I drove home, I thought about how different tomorrow would be. For 7 years, I'd maintained my cover, building my empire in secret while my family dismissed me as the disappointing daughter who'd chosen books over business. Tomorrow, they'd learn just how wrong they'd been. The next morning, I arrived at the library precisely at 8, just as I had every day for the past 7 years. My sensible shoes echoed through the marble halls as I made my way to my office, nodding at the early morning regulars who never questioned why the head librarian kept such strict hours. Sarah was waiting for me, her tablet in hand. In the library, she played the role of my assistant librarian perfectly. Outside these walls, she was the COO of Morgan Global Partners and one of the sharpest business minds I ever met. Everything's ready, she said quietly as we entered my office. The lawyers are gathering in Tokyo. Press release goes out in 45 minutes. I set my bag down and powered up my secure laptop. Any word from Drew's team? They're still expecting to close the Nakamura deal this morning. Your brother's lawyers are setting up in their offices right now. I smiled, imagining Drew's face when he realized what was about to happen. Let's give them a few more minutes of hope. At precisely 8:55, my private line rang. Ms. Morgan, Mr. Nakamura's translator said, "Everyone is in position." Excellent. Let's proceed. The next few minutes were a blur of signatures and confirmations. By 9:00 a.m., Morgan Global Partners officially owned Nakamura Tech, along with its subsidiaries, patents, and cutting-edge technology division. Press release going out now, Sarah announced. I pulled up several news sites on my screen, watching as the story broke across multiple platforms simultaneously. Breaking. Mystery buyer acquires Nakamura Tech. Global finance giant Morgan Global Partners reveals identity of founder. Wall Street stunned as library sciences expert named as business mogul. My phone started buzzing immediately. The first call, predictably, was from Drew. What the hell is this? He demanded without preamble. Some sick joke? Good morning to you too, brother, I replied calmly. I take it you've seen the news. This is impossible, he sputtered. Morgan Global Partners. That's not. You're not. The founder and CEO. Actually, I am. Have been for 7 years now. Though I understand your confusion, after all, I'm just a librarian, right? There was a long silence, broken only by what sounded like papers being frantically shuffled. But I had a deal. The paperwork was ready. Was it? I asked innocently. You might want to check the fine print. Nakamura Tech has been in play for months. We've just been waiting for the right moment to finalize things. We? His voice cracked. Who's we? My team, my company, my empire. I paused, letting each word sink in. You know, the one I built while you were busy mocking my career choices. The line went dead. I looked at Sarah, who was trying to hide her grin. How long until my parents call? She checked her watch. I give it 3, 2. Right on cue, my mother's number flashed on my screen. Julia Elizabeth Morgan. Her voice was shrill enough to crack glass. What have you done? Good morning, Mom. I'm a bit busy at the moment. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner. Dinner? Dinner? Do you have any idea what's happening? Your father's phone is ringing off the hook. The Prescotts are calling. The club is calling. Everyone wants to know how our librarian daughter secretly built a multi-billion-dollar company. I could hear Dad in the background, apparently trying to field calls of his own. Tell her to get over here right now, he shouted. I have meetings all day, I said, which was true. The acquisition of Nakamura Tech was just the beginning. But I'd be happy to host everyone for dinner at my place tonight. Say, 7 o'clock. Your place. Mom's voice dripped with suspicion. You mean that little apartment near the library? No, I mean my penthouse on Highland Avenue. I'll text you the address. There was a long pause. Highland Avenue, but that's the most expensive building in the city. Is it? I hadn't noticed. See you at 7, Mom. After ending the call, I took a moment to breathe. 7 years of secrets were finally coming to light. 7 years of careful planning, of maintaining my cover while building something extraordinary. Ready for phase 2? Sarah asked. I nodded. Send out the second press release. This one was even bigger than the first. Morgan Global Partners announces merger with East Asian tech giants. Deal valued at $50 billion. The merger had been in the works for months, but we timed it perfectly to follow the Nakamura acquisition. By the time my family arrived for dinner, the business world would be reeling from two of the biggest deals of the decade, both orchestrated by the quiet librarian they'd dismissed for so long. The rest of the day passed in a carefully choreographed dance of meetings, interviews, and strategic planning. I gave exactly one interview to the Wall Street Journal, explaining how my background in library sciences had actually been perfect preparation for building a global empire. Information is power, I told the reporter, and who better to understand the value of information than a librarian? At 6:30, I left the library and headed to my real office, the top floor of the Highland Avenue building that had been my home for the past 5 years. The penthouse occupied the entire floor, though I'd maintained a small apartment near the library for appearance's sake. My private elevator opened directly into the foyer, where my actual home office put Drew's corporate headquarters to shame. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while state-of-the-art technology allowed me to manage my empire from anywhere into space. Sarah had arranged for dinner to be catered by the city's most exclusive restaurant, another establishment quietly owned by Morgan Global Partners. The dining room table was set with the kind of understated elegance that only old money could truly appreciate. At precisely 7 o'clock, the elevator announced my family's arrival. Drew entered first, his earlier swagger replaced by barely contained fury. Mom and Dad followed, both looking shell-shocked. Even Jenkins, who had insisted on accompanying them, seemed unsure how to process the transformation of the family's poor relation into one of the city's wealthiest residents. "Welcome to my home," I said, gesturing to the spectacular view. "Drink?" "How long?" Drew demanded. "How long have you been lying to us?" "Lying?" I moved to the bar, pouring myself a scotch. "I never lied about anything. I am a librarian. I do love books. I just happen to run a global financial empire as well." But why?" Mom sank onto one of my Italian leather sofas. "Why the deception? Why let us think that I was a failure?" I finished for her, that I'd wasted my potential, maybe because you never bothered to look past your own assumptions. You saw what you expected to see, the disappointing daughter who chose books over business. Dad was standing by the windows, staring out at the city he thought he knew so well. "All this time," he murmured. "All those companies we've been reading about, the mysterious acquisitions." "That was you," Drew said flatly. "Morgan Global Partners. The competition everyone's been trying to figure out. The shadow empire that's been reshaping the market." I smiled. "It does have a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Though I prefer to think of it as a knowledge empire. After all, that's what you taught me, isn't it, Dad? Knowledge is power." He turned to face me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something new in his eyes. Respect. "The Nakamura deal," he said slowly. "How long have you been planning that?" "About 6 months, though I've owned controlling interest in their subsidiaries for over a year." I looked at Drew. "You never wondered why they kept finding reasons to delay your offer?" My brother's face went from red to white. You've been playing me all this time." "Not playing, Drew, competing. Isn't that what you always wanted? A chance to prove who was better at business." "But it wasn't fair," he exploded. "You had inside information, secret resources." "Inside information?" I laughed. "You mean like the kind you get from your golf club buddies? The deals you make on private yachts and exclusive resorts?" I set my glass down carefully. "I built my empire with nothing but intelligence, hard work, and a deep understanding of how information flows. Everything I learned in my little library job gave me an edge you couldn't see." "Dinner is served," a voice announced discreetly. We moved to the dining room, the tension thick enough to cut with one of my sterling silver knives. Mom kept looking around as if trying to reconcile this environment with her mental image of my life. Dad seemed lost in thought, probably recalculating every business decision he'd made in the past 7 years. "I suppose," Mom said finally, staring at her perfect place setting, "this explains how you could afford those Louboutins." I couldn't help but laugh. "Yes, Mom. That's what you should focus on, my shoe budget." "What happens now?" Drew asked, pushing his food around his plate. "Going to buy out Morgan Industries too." "Actually, I have a different proposition. I nodded to Sarah, who appeared with a folder. Your company has potential, Drew. Good bones, as they say in real estate. What it lacks is vision and modern infrastructure. He frowned. What are you suggesting? A partnership. Morgan Industries handles the traditional side, while Morgan Global Partners brings the technology and global reach. Together, we could build something even bigger. You want to work with me, after everything? No, I corrected him. I want to work with the businessman you could be, if you got over your ego and learned to see value in unexpected places. Dad set down his fork. Julia's right, he said, surprising everyone. This is an opportunity, Drew. A chance to be part of something bigger than ourselves. But she lied to us. Drew protested. Made us look like fools. No, Dad shook his head. We made ourselves look like fools. We were so convinced we knew what success looked like that we couldn't see it taking a different form. Your sister, she saw something we missed, built something we never imagined. Mom dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. All those times we pitied you, she said softly, worried about your future. I know, I said, gentler now. But maybe it's time to stop worrying about appearances and start focusing on substance. Isn't that what real business is about? The rest of dinner was a careful dance of revelations and reconciliations. I explained how I built my company, how the library had provided the perfect cover and connections. Dad asked increasingly detailed questions about my business strategy, his initial shock giving way to genuine admiration. Even Drew began to thaw as I outlined my vision for our potential partnership. By dessert, he was suggesting ways to integrate our operations. His natural business instincts finally focused on creation rather than competition. There's one thing I don't understand, Mom said as coffee was served. Why reveal everything now? Why not just stay in the shadows? I looked at my brother, because sometimes people need to be reminded that success doesn't always wear a suit and tie. That power doesn't always announce itself with a Rolex and a corner office. And sometimes, Drew added quietly, people need to be reminded not to judge a book by its cover. Exactly. Later that night, after my family had left, Dad with a stack of proposals to review, Mom with a list of social events to recalibrate, and Drew with a lot to think about, I stood at my windows watching the city lights. Sarah joined me, handing me a fresh scotch. Well, that went better than expected. Did it? I smiled. Or did it go exactly as planned? You knew they'd react this way. I knew they'd have to confront their own prejudices, their assumptions about success and worth. I sipped my drink. The question is whether the lesson will stick. She checked her tablet. Stocks up 30% since the announcement. Your brother's company is up 10% just on rumors of a potential partnership. Good. Let's give it a week. Let everything settle. Then announce the merger. By then, Drew might actually be ready to be a real partner. And your parents? I thought about Mom's tearful apology, Dad's proud smile as he finally saw me, really saw me, for the first time. They're learning. Sometimes the hardest part of success is accepting that it doesn't always look the way you expect. The next morning, I'd arrived at the library at my usual time. The same regulars were in their usual spots, nodding hello to their favorite librarian. None of them treated me any differently, though my face was splashed across every business publication in the country. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. In a world obsessed with image and status, I built something real, something that didn't need designer labels or social validation to prove its worth. I was still a librarian. I still loved books. I just happened to be a billionaire, too. Knowledge, after all, comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you least expect. I can't believe you're actually going through with this, Olivia said, her voice dripping with disdain as she leaned against my office doorframe. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been finalizing the business plan I'd spent months perfecting. My sister stood there in her designer suit, every inch of her radiating the confidence that came from never having to fight for anything in her life. Why wouldn't I? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been working on this concept for over a year. The market research shows there's a huge demand for sustainable fashion rental services, especially in. Please, she cut me off with a dismissive wave. You really think you can pull this off? You've never even run a business before. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 28, I was about to launch my dream company, a revolutionary platform that would transform how people thought about fashion consumption. The idea had come to me during my years working in retail management, watching countless customers struggle with the balance between wanting to stay trendy and being environmentally conscious. My solution was simple but innovative: a subscription-based service that would allow people to rent high-end sustainable fashion pieces, with a portion of the profits going to environmental causes. I'd spent countless nights researching, planning, and building connections with sustainable fashion brands. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the eco-friendly packaging to the blockchain-based tracking system that would ensure transparency in our supply chain. This wasn't just a business idea. It was my passion, my way of making a real difference in an industry desperately needing change. But Olivia had always had a way of making my dreams seem small, insignificant. At 32, she was the successful one in our family, working as a marketing executive at a prestigious firm. She'd always done everything first, better, smoother. And she never let me forget it. "I've done my homework," I replied, turning back to my laptop. "The business plan is solid, the financial projections are conservative but promising, and I've already got interest from several investors." She walked into my office, picking up one of the sample sustainable fabric swatches from my desk. "Oh, really? And how much startup capital do you need?" $250,000, I said, watching as her perfectly manicured fingers toyed with the fabric. "I'm meeting with Mom and Dad this weekend to discuss their investment." That's when I saw it, the flash in her eyes, the slight curl of her lip. I should have recognized it for what it was: the look of a predator spotting prey. "Well, good luck with that," she said, dropping the fabric back on my desk. "I'm sure it'll be interesting." I didn't think much of her visit at the time. That was my first mistake. The family dinner that weekend started like any other, with Mom fussing over the table settings and Dad talking about his golf game. I'd spent hours preparing my presentation, making sure every detail was perfect. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my laptop. "Before we start dinner," I began, "I wanted to talk to you both about an investment opportunity." But before I could even open my presentation, Olivia cleared her throat. "Actually," she said, setting down her wine glass with a deliberate click, "I have something I'd like to discuss too." My stomach tightened as she pulled out her own laptop. "I've been working on an exciting new venture," she announced, her voice carrying that confident tone she perfected over years of corporate presentations. "A revolutionary platform in the sustainable fashion space." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as I watched her pull up a sleek presentation, complete with professional graphics and animations. My presentation suddenly felt amateur in comparison. As she spoke, describing my idea with practiced ease, adding just enough tweaks to make it seem like her own, I felt the blood drain from my face. "The market research shows huge potential," she was saying, using the exact phrases I'd shared with her in my office. "And with my experience in marketing and business development, we could dominate this space within 2 years." Mom and Dad were enthralled, nodding along as she wove her spell. They'd always been impressed by her corporate success, her polished demeanor. When she finished, Dad was already reaching for his checkbook. "This is impressive, Olivia," he said, beaming with pride. "Very impressive. How much are you looking for?" "$500,000, she replied smoothly, "to really do it right." "Now that's thinking big," Mom added, shooting me a quick glance. "Sarah, didn't you want to discuss something too?" I sat there, frozen, as the magnitude of what had just happened sank in. My sister hadn't just stolen my idea. She'd taken my dream and sold it as her own, knowing she had the credentials and connections to make it more appealing to our parents. "No," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. It's nothing." Later that night, as I was leaving, Olivia caught up with me in the driveway. "Hey, no hard feelings, right?" she said, her smile sharp in the darkness. "Business is business. And let's be honest, I can execute this so much better than you ever could. Good luck competing, though." Her laugh echoed in my ears as I drove home, tears blurring my vision. But among the hurt and betrayal, something else was crystallizing: determination. If Olivia thought she could just steal my dream and get away with it, she was about to learn a very important lesson. I spent that night going through everything. All my research, my contacts, my plans. Olivia might have taken my basic idea, but she didn't have the depth of knowledge I'd accumulated over the past year. She didn't have the relationships I'd built with sustainable fashion brands, or the understanding of the complex supply chain issues involved. Most importantly, she didn't have my backup plan. You see, while developing my business concept, I discovered something crucial. The sustainable fashion industry had a significant authentication problem. Many brands claiming to be eco-friendly were actually greenwashing their products, using clever marketing to hide unsustainable practices. My original business plan had included a proprietary authentication system that would use blockchain technology to track and verify the sustainability claims of our partner brands. It was complex, technical, and I hadn't shared those details with Olivia during her office visit. She had the shell of my idea, but not its revolutionary core. The next morning, I called Marcus, my best friend from college who now worked in tech development. "Remember that authentication system we discussed?" I asked. "How quickly can we make it operational?" "The prototype's already built," he replied. "We could have a working version in 3 months, maybe less." "Why?" I took a deep breath. "Because we're going to beat my sister at her own game." Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as Olivia threw our parents' money at launching her version of my business. She hired a flashy PR firm, rented expensive office space, and started making grand promises about revolutionizing sustainable fashion. Her company, which she named EcoChick, generated quite a buzz in the local business scene. Meanwhile, I worked quietly but steadily. I sold my car, emptied my savings, and took out a small business loan. It wasn't $500,000, but it was enough to start. Marcus and his team worked around the clock on the authentication system, while I focused on building real relationships with truly sustainable brands who understood the value of what we were creating. I named my company True Thread, simple, honest, and direct. Everything Olivia wasn't. 3 months later, just as EcoChick was preparing for its grand launch, I made my move. I didn't do it with flashy PR or expensive parties. Instead, I published a detailed white paper revealing the extent of greenwashing in the fashion industry, along with our blockchain-based solution for authenticating truly sustainable products. The paper went viral in sustainability circles. Major fashion blogs picked it up, and suddenly True Thread was being hailed as a potential game-changer in sustainable fashion. More importantly, several high-profile sustainable brands reached out, excited about the possibility of proving their eco-friendly credentials. Olivia's launch party was scheduled for the following week. I didn't attend, but I heard all about it from Mom, who called to tell me how impressive everything looked. The offices were beautiful, the champagne was flowing, and Olivia gave a passionate speech about revolutionizing sustainable fashion. What Olivia didn't know was that 3 of her biggest potential brand partners had already signed exclusive agreements with True Thread. They'd been impressed by our authentication system and our genuine commitment to sustainability. More importantly, they'd been concerned about the lack of technical depth in EcoChick's approach. The first cracks in Olivia's facade appeared about 2 months after her launch. Without proper authentication measures, EcoChick had accidentally partnered with several brands that were later exposed for greenwashing. The scandal was minor, but it was enough to make other potential partners nervous. Meanwhile, True Thread was growing steadily. Our authentication system was proving its worth, and our commitment to transparency was attracting both customers and partners. We weren't growing as fast as EcoChick, but we were building something sustainable in every sense of the word. I was in my office late one evening, reviewing partnership agreements, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Olivia's been drinking. She's very upset." "What did you do?" I didn't respond. I knew what was coming. The next morning, Olivia showed up at my office. Gone was the designer suit and the perfect makeup. She looked tired, desperate. "We need to talk," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same spot where, months ago, she had dismissed my dreams with a wave of her hand. "I'm listening," I said quietly, watching as my sister struggled to find the words that would salvage her failing business. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in watching your enemies fall, but in knowing you succeeded despite them. Olivia sat across from me, fidgeting with her watch, a nervous habit I hadn't seen since we were kids. The morning light streaming through my office window highlighted the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. This wasn't the polished sister who had smugly stolen my dreams. This was someone on the edge of desperation. "I need your help," she finally said, the words seeming to physically pain her. EcoChick is in trouble. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us. Part of me wanted to savor this moment, to let her feel the full weight of her actions. But another part, the part that remembered building sandcastles with her at the beach and sharing secrets under blanket forts, ached at seeing her so broken. What kind of trouble? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture so uncharacteristically vulnerable that it caught me off guard. Everything's falling apart, she admitted. The greenwashing scandal was just the beginning. We've lost 3 more brand partnerships this week. Our authentication process is a mess. We can't verify half the claims our partners make about their sustainability practices. And now, she paused, swallowing hard. Now there's a class action lawsuit brewing. Some customers are claiming we misled them about the environmental impact of our products. I felt my stomach tighten. A lawsuit could not only destroy EcoChick, but could damage the entire sustainable fashion movement we were trying to build. This was bigger than just Olivia's failure. It could hurt the very cause I dedicated myself to. What about Mom and Dad's investment? I asked, already dreading the answer. Olivia's eyes welled up. Gone. All of it. $500,000. I've tried everything, Sarah. Hired consultants, brought in experts, but nothing works. We need your authentication system. We need TrueThread's credibility. The irony wasn't lost on me. The sister who had dismissed my capabilities, who had stolen my idea and claimed she could execute it better, was now asking for the very expertise she'd once mocked. And what exactly are you proposing? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions inside me. A merger, she said quickly, as if getting the words out faster would make them more palatable. EcoChick and TrueThread. Together we'd have the market presence and the technical backbone. You have the authentication system and the trust of the sustainable brands. We have the marketing reach and the customer base. It makes sense. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The same view I'd stared at countless nights while building TrueThread from scratch, without family support or connections. Just pure determination and belief in my vision. It makes sense, I repeated softly, turning back to face her. Just like it made sense for you to steal my idea and convince our parents to invest in you instead of me. Just like it made sense to laugh in my face and tell me I couldn't compete. Olivia flinched. I was wrong, she whispered. I was arrogant and cruel, and I was wrong about everything. You've built something amazing here, something real. I just took the surface idea and threw money at it, but you understood the depth of what was needed. You always did. Her admission hung in the air between us, heavy with years of rivalry and resentment. I sat back down, pulling up TrueThread's latest financial reports on my computer. Do you know what these numbers mean, Olivia? I asked, turning the screen toward her. They show that TrueThread is now valued at over $5 million. We're profitable, growing, and most importantly, we're making a real difference in the industry. We've helped expose 3 major greenwashing operations and provided certification for dozens of genuinely sustainable brands. I let that sink in before continuing. And do you know how we got here? By understanding that sustainability isn't just a marketing buzzword. It's a commitment that requires knowledge, transparency, and integrity. Olivia nodded, wiping away a tear. I know that now, but it's not just about the money anymore, Sarah. If EcoChick goes down like this, it could damage consumer trust in sustainable fashion for years. Everything you've worked for, everything you believe in, it could all be tainted by association. She was right, and that was the most frustrating part. The sustainable fashion movement was still fragile, still fighting against decades of fast fashion dominance. A high-profile failure and lawsuit could set us back years. I pulled up another document on my computer, one I'd prepared months ago, almost as if I'd known this day would come. I'm not interested in a merger, I said firmly, watching her face fall. But I am willing to discuss an acquisition. Her head snapped up. An acquisition? TrueThread would absorb EcoChick's assets and customer base. We'd handle the transition of your existing partnerships to our authentication system. Most importantly, we'd implement proper sustainability verification for all products, which should help mitigate the lawsuit risks. I slid a paper across the desk to her. These are my terms. They're non-negotiable. Olivia picked up the document with trembling hands. As she read, her eyes widened. This would mean. You work for me, I finished. Not as an executive, But as a regular employee in our marketing department, you'd start at entry level and earn any promotions based on merit, not family connections. And you'd have to publicly acknowledge that TrueThread's authentication system was your sister's innovation that you initially borrowed. She stared at the paper for a long moment. And Mom and Dad's investment? I'll ensure they get partial recovery of their investment through shares in TrueThread. Not all of it. They made their choice when they backed you without even hearing my pitch. But enough to show that family still means something to me. Olivia looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister instead of my rival. Why would you do this? After everything I did to you? I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up working on TrueThread, all the obstacles I'd overcome, all the strength I found in myself when everyone else had doubted me. Because success isn't about destroying your competition, I said softly. It's about staying true to your vision and your values, and my vision was always about making the fashion industry more sustainable, more transparent. This acquisition serves that goal. I paused, letting a small smile cross my face. Besides, watching you have to learn things the right way, from the ground up, might be satisfaction enough. A week later, we announced the acquisition. The press praised it as a smart consolidation in the sustainable fashion space, but those who knew the whole story saw it for what it was, a testament to the power of doing things the right way, even when others take shortcuts. Olivia started her new role the following Monday. I watched from my office as she was shown to her small cubicle, accepting the standard employee laptop and orientation packet with a humility I'd never seen in her before. It was strange seeing her without the designer suits and perfect makeup, dressed in business casual like any other employee. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I found a note on my desk written in Olivia's familiar handwriting. I never said it properly before, but I'm sorry, not just for stealing your idea, but for every time I made you feel less than. You've built something extraordinary here, and I hope one day I can earn the right to be proud to be your sister again. Thank you for giving me a chance to learn from you. Oh. I tucked the note into my desk drawer and headed home, feeling lighter than I had in months. The next morning, I had Marcus start training Olivia on our authentication system. If she was going to work her way up in my company, she was going to learn everything from the ground up, starting with the very thing she should have valued from the beginning. Over the next few months, I watched as Olivia threw herself into learning every aspect of the business. She stayed late, asked questions, and most surprisingly showed genuine interest in understanding the technical side of our authentication system. The employees who didn't know our history were impressed by her work ethic. Those who did watched with a mix of amusement and respect as she earned her place, one small victory at a time. Mom and Dad took longer to come around. The loss of their investment had strained family relationships, and it took several uncomfortable Sunday dinners before we could all sit at the same table without tension. But gradually, as they saw how TrueThread was growing and how Olivia was changing, things began to heal. 1 year after the acquisition, I called Olivia into my office. She entered with the quiet confidence she developed, so different from her old arrogance. I've been reviewing your performance reports, I said, gesturing for her to sit. Your supervisors speak highly of your work, particularly your recent campaign for our Authentication Awareness Initiative. She nodded, waiting for me to continue. There's a senior marketing position opening up, I said, watching her carefully. You'd be welcome to apply, just like any other employee. A smile spread across her face, not the smug grin of old, but something genuine and warm. Thank you, but I think I'll wait. I'm still learning so much in my current role, and honestly, I want to earn it, really earn it this time. I felt a surge of pride, not just in my company's success, but in watching my sister become someone who finally understood the value of doing things the right way. Well, I said, standing up and gathering my things, in that case, want to grab coffee? I've been working on some new ideas for expanding our authentication system, and I'd love your marketing perspective. As we walked to the coffee shop, discussing business ideas and sharing genuine laughs, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about growing beyond what hurt you, and maybe even helping others grow too. TrueThread continued to lead the sustainable fashion revolution, but more importantly, it stood as proof that success built on integrity lasts longer than any shortcut. And every time I saw Olivia working late at her desk, poring over sustainability reports, or crafting honest marketing campaigns, I knew that some lessons, though hard learned, were worth every difficult moment along the way. Sign these papers. My mother-in-law slammed a stack of documents onto my desk, making my coffee cup rattle. Her face wore that familiar look of contempt I'd grown used to over the past 5 years. I'm Amanda Chen, 35 years old, and I own one of the most successful tech consulting firms in our city. Well, at least I did until my in-laws decided they wanted to take it from me. What are these? I asked calmly, though my heart was racing. Transfer of ownership papers. It's time you handed the business over to Richard. He has an MBA, and know how to run it properly. Richard, my brother-in-law. The golden child who'd never worked a day in his life, but somehow believed he deserved everything handed to him. I looked at my husband, Tom, who stood quietly in the corner of my office. His silence spoke volumes. After 12 years of marriage, he still couldn't stand up to his mother. This is my company, I said firmly. I built it from nothing. My mother-in-law laughed, that shrill, condescending laugh that always made my skin crawl. Oh, please. Everyone knows your grandfather handed you the seed money. You just got lucky. Besides, your family now, and in this family, the men handle the business decisions. I thought back to my grandfather, who passed away 6 months ago. He was more than just my grandfather. He was my mentor, my inspiration. Yes, he had helped me start my business, but not in the way they thought. Margaret, I addressed my mother-in-law. I won't be signing anything. She straightened her designer blazer, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on my desk. You ungrateful little. Do you know how much we've done for you? We welcomed you into our family despite your background. The least you could do is show some appreciation. By background, she meant being half Chinese and coming from a middle-class family. They never let me forget that I wasn't from their social circle. Mom, Tom finally spoke up, but his voice was weak. Maybe we should discuss this at home. No, Thomas. I've had enough of your wife's attitude. Either she signs the papers or what? I asked, my voice steady. Or we'll make sure everyone knows how you really got your start. About the money your grandfather gave you. About the connections we provided. Where do you think your biggest clients came from? They're all our friends. I had to suppress a smile. If only they knew the truth about those clients. Just then, my office phone buzzed. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Harrison is here to see you. He says it's urgent. Perfect timing. Send him in, I replied. The door opened, and in walked James Harrison, my grandfather's lawyer. He carried a leather briefcase and wore an expression that meant business. Mrs. Chen, I apologize for interrupting, but it's time. My mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. Time for what? The reading of Gerald Chen's final will and testament. The real one. What do you mean, real one? Tom asked, finally showing some interest. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. You see, the will that was read 6 months ago wasn't the complete version. My grandfather had a second will sealed until today, exactly 6 months after his death. Mr. Harrison opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. Shall we begin? My mother-in-law's face had lost some of its color, but she quickly recovered. This is ridiculous. We're in the middle of an important business discussion. Oh, you'll want to hear this, I said, finally allowing myself a small smile. It's about the business after all. As Mr. Harrison began to read, I watched the color drain completely from my in-laws' faces, because what they were about to learn would change everything, not just about my business, but about every assumption they'd made about me for the past 12 years. My grandfather's final gift to me wasn't just money or property. It was something far more valuable. The truth about who really owned what in this family and how deep the connections really went. And as the lawyer continued reading, I realized this was just the beginning of a much bigger storm that was about to hit the Chen family. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. I, Gerald Chen, being of sound mind, declare this to be my final will and testament, superseding all previous versions. My mother-in-law interrupted. We've already heard this part 6 months ago. Get to the point. Mr. Harrison gave her a cold look before continuing. However, the following provisions were to remain sealed for 6 months after my death, to allow certain events to unfold naturally. I noticed Tom shifting uncomfortably by the window. He knew something. I could tell by the way he couldn't meet my eyes. To my granddaughter, Amanda Chen, I leave not only my personal fortune as previously stated, but also reveal the following. The Chen Global Holdings, currently believed to be owned by the Chen family, has been under my majority ownership for the past 20 years. The silence in the room was deafening. My mother-in-law's face turned an interesting shade of purple. That's impossible. My husband built that company. Actually, Margaret, I finally spoke up. Your husband nearly bankrupted it in 2003. My grandfather stepped in and bought 67% of the shares, saving it from collapse. He kept it quiet to spare your family's reputation. You're lying, she shrieked. Mr. Harrison pulled out another document. I have the original purchase agreements here, along with 20 years of board meeting minutes. Tom finally found his voice. Dad told me something about this last year. He made me promise not to tell anyone. I turned to him, hurt flooding my chest. You knew? All this time? I didn't know everything. Just that there was some deal with your grandfather. Mr. Harrison continued reading. Furthermore, all clients currently associated with Chen Global Holdings were originally contacted and secured through my personal business network, not through the Chen family connections as they have claimed. My mother-in-law sank into a chair, her designer blazer wrinkled and her perfect hair coming undone. The final revelation, Mr. Harrison read, concerns the tech consulting firm owned by my granddaughter, Amanda. While I did provide initial guidance, I never gave her any seed money. She built it entirely on her own merit, securing loans and investors through her own business plan and reputation. I remembered those early days, the countless pitches, the late nights, the rejected applications. My grandfather had insisted I do it on my own, saying true respect comes from what you build yourself. However, Mr. Harrison continued, I did secretly arrange for her firm to be given fair consideration by several major clients. The same clients the Chen family has been taking credit for providing. I wanted to see if she could maintain and grow those relationships on her own merit. The results speak for themselves. Richard burst into the office then, his face red with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and claim our family company. I stayed calm. The ownership documents prove everything. Your father has known the truth for 20 years. Dad would never. Your father signed the papers himself. Mr. Harrison interjected, pulling out more documents. In fact, he left additional instructions to be revealed today. He produced another envelope. This letter is from Howard Chen, written 3 months ago. My mother-in-law's head snapped up. Howard wrote a letter. Mr. Harrison began reading. To my family, if you're hearing this, it means Gerald's will has been revealed. Everything he said is true. I made terrible business decisions 20 years ago, and he saved not just our company, but our family's reputation. In return, I promised to keep his majority ownership secret and to watch over his granddaughter when she married my son. Tom moved closer to me, his face pale. Dad never said. The letter continued, I've watched Amanda build her business from nothing. While my family treated her as an outsider, I saw what Gerald saw. A brilliant businesswoman who earned every bit of her success. I was too much of a coward to stand up to my wife and son's prejudices, and for that, I am deeply ashamed. Tears were rolling down my cheeks now. Howard, my father-in-law, had always been quiet, but I'd never known he felt this way. Therefore, Mr. Harrison read, I, Howard Chen, hereby announce my retirement as CEO of Chen Global Holdings, effective immediately upon the reading of this letter. I recommend Amanda Chen as my successor, subject to board approval, which Gerald's majority share will ensure. The room erupted in chaos. This is outrageous, my mother-in-law screamed. Richard knocked over a chair. She can't run both companies. Actually, I said quietly, I can. I've been preparing for this for the past 6 months. My company's management team is ready to take over day-to-day operations while I focus on Chen Global Holdings. Tom stared at me. You knew? All this time you knew? I found out the day after grandfather died. He left me a private letter explaining everything. He wanted me to wait, to let the truth come out naturally, to give everyone a chance to show their true colors. My mother-in-law stood up, straightening her blazer one final time. This isn't over. We'll fight this in court. Mr. Harrison smiled for the first time. You can certainly try, Mrs. Chen. But I've spent the last 20 years documenting everything. Every insult, every attempt to undermine Amanda, every discriminatory comment, all documented and witnessed. Do you really want that becoming public record? She froze. Additionally, he continued, I have here several documents showing questionable financial transactions made by Richard through company accounts over the past 5 years. Richard's face went white. Those were approved expenses. Personal vacation homes and luxury cars charged to the company. I doubt the IRS would agree. Tom finally stepped forward, standing beside me. Enough. Mom, Richard, it's over. Amanda has earned this. You're taking her side? Richard spat. After everything we've done for you. Yes, Tom said firmly. For the first time in our marriage, I'm doing what I should have done years ago. Supporting my wife. My mother-in-law grabbed her designer bag. I won't forget this betrayal. Any of it. She stormed out, Richard following close behind. When they were gone, Tom turned to me. I'm so sorry, Amanda. I knew bits and pieces, but I never. I held up my hand. We'll talk about this later. Right now, I have a company to run. 2 companies, actually. Mr. Harrison packed up his briefcase. Everything is in order, Mrs. Chen. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Your grandfather believed you would face this moment with grace and strength. I see he was right. After he left, I sat at my desk, looking at the photo of my grandfather I kept there. His kind eyes seemed to twinkle with pride. Tom lingered by the door. What happens now? I picked up the ownership transfer papers his mother had brought in and dropped them in the shredder. Now we see who in this family is strong enough to accept change. As I watched the papers turn to confetti, I couldn't help but smile. My grandfather had given me one final lesson about business, family, and the price of truth. But this was just the middle of the story. Because tomorrow, I would walk into Chen Global Holdings as its new CEO. And that's when the real challenge would begin. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my suit jacket. Today would change everything. Are you ready? Tom asked from the doorway. I've been ready for 6 months, I replied, picking up my briefcase. The question is, are you ready for what's about to happen to your family? He stepped forward, taking my hand. They're not just my family anymore. We're a family, and I'm done choosing the wrong side. The drive to Chen Global Holdings was tense. Security had already been notified about the change in leadership, and as we pulled up to the executive parking area, I saw Richard's car was already there. He's not going to make this easy, Tom warned. Good, I said, stepping out of the car. I didn't build my own company by taking the easy path. The boardroom was full when we arrived. 12 board members, all men over 60, sat around the massive mahogany table. Richard and my mother-in-law sat at one end, while Howard Chen, my father-in-law, sat quietly at the other. Mr. Harrison was already there, documents spread before him. You can't seriously be considering this, my mother-in-law was saying as we walked in. She'll destroy everything we've built. Everything you built? Howard's quiet voice cut through the room. It was the first time I ever heard him speak up against his wife. Margaret, it's time for truth. We almost lost everything 20 years ago because of my poor decisions. Gerald Chen saved us. And now his granddaughter will save us again. Howard, she gasped. No, Margaret, I've been quiet too long. He stood up, addressing the board. Gentlemen, I fully support Amanda Chen as the new CEO of this company. She has proven herself not just as a successful business owner, but as someone who understands the modern market in ways we failed to grasp. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. She's not even a real Chen. Actually, Mr. Harrison interjected. According to these documents, she has more right to the Chen name than you do, Richard. Would you like me to explain why? Richard's face went pale. He knew what those documents would reveal about his own business dealings. The board chairman cleared his throat. We've reviewed the ownership documents and Howard's recommendation. Given Gerald Chen's majority share and his explicit wishes, combined with Mrs. Chen's proven track record in the tech sector, I believe we should proceed with the vote. My mother-in-law stood up. If you do this, you'll regret it. I know things about this company, about all of you. Mom, Tom interrupted. Stop. Don't make this worse. Worse? She laughed hysterically. Your wife is stealing our company. No, I finally spoke. I'm saving it. Again, would you like to see the company's current financial reports? The ones Richard has been hiding from the board? Richard jumped up. You can't prove anything. Actually, Howard said, pulling out a USB drive, I can. I've been gathering evidence for months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the money you were funneling to your private accounts? The board chairman's face darkened. What money? Over the next hour, the truth came out. Richard had been embezzling funds, hiding losses, and falsifying reports. My mother-in-law had been aware but kept quiet, using the information to blackmail her way into more control. When the vote came, it was unanimous. I was named CEO of Chen Global Holdings, effective immediately. Your first act should be calling the authorities, one board member suggested, glaring at Richard. No, I said firmly. My first act will be offering Richard and his mother a choice. Everyone turned to look at me. Option 1. You both resign quietly, sign non-disclosure agreements, and I don't pursue criminal charges for the embezzlement. You'll retain your personal shares but have no operational control. And option 2, Richard asked, his voice shaking. I turn everything over to the FBI. Every transaction, every hidden account, every piece of evidence Howard and my grandfather collected, your choice. My mother-in-law's facade finally cracked. You would show mercy. After everything? I'm not doing it for you, I replied. I'm doing it for this company, its employees, and its legacy. A public scandal helps no one. It took option 1, of course. Richard and my mother-in-law left the building that day, never to return. The press release simply stated they had chosen to pursue other opportunities. Over the next year, I reorganized both companies, merging my tech consulting firm's innovation with Chen Global's resources. Profits doubled. Employee satisfaction soared. The board's initial skepticism turned to wholehearted support. Tom found his own path too, starting a charitable foundation that helped immigrant entrepreneurs, his way of making amends for his family's past behavior. Howard became one of my closest advisors, his quiet wisdom helping me navigate the challenges of running a major corporation. He and Tom rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of truth rather than fear. My mother-in-law moved to Florida, where she apparently tells anyone who will listen that she retired early to enjoy the sunshine. Richard took a job with a small firm in another state, humbled by his fall from grace. As for me, I kept my grandfather's photo on my desk, both at the office and at home. His final gift wasn't just the company, it was the chance to prove that success doesn't come from family names or connections, but from hard work, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. Last week, as I sat in my grandfather's old office, my office now, Tom brought our daughter by after school. She's 7, and already shows the same determination I had at her age. Mommy, she asked, looking around the big office, will I run the company someday? I smiled, thinking of my grandfather's words. True respect comes from what you build yourself. That's up to you, sweetheart, I told her. You can run this company, start your own, or do anything else you dream of. The most important thing is to do it your way, with integrity and strength. She nodded solemnly, then brightened. Like you did. Yes, I said, hugging her close. Exactly like that. After they left, I looked out over the city skyline, thinking about how much had changed in just 1 year. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in boardrooms or with lawyers, but within families where love and duty clash with truth and justice. But in the end, the truth always comes out. And when it does, you find out who really deserves to be called family. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories. See you in the next video.